It starts with being uncomfortable with who you are, feeling unacceptable as a young person. I started using when I was 9 years old. First time I got high, it felt really great. I felt like I fit in better, so I continued to use small drugs. I got married when I was 18 years old. My wife used. We both drank occasionally. We divorced when my son was 2.5. So I started using harder drugs, and started losing everything I had. Jobs, couldn't hold a job down. I had gotten into real hardcore drugs. Instead of using like I had always did, I got to a point to where it was the first thought I had when I got up, the last thought I had before I either passed out. But I was on a dirt road, and I was using my choice of drugs that day, and it was daytime, and all of a sudden it was nighttime, and I didn't even know how I got to the place that I was at, so I didn't know how to get out. But long story short, I made it out. I got home at the beginning of that day when I started using. I had a white t-shirt on, which had become yellow from the drug that I was using. So I realized at that point that maybe I need to make a change. So I went to my mother, and we went down to the hospital, and they checked me into the First Step Rehab down here in Danville, Virginia. I remember walking through the door to be entered into the program, and I looked back, and there was no doorknob. And the lady that was done the orientation on me to take me in, I asked her, I said, you know, there's no doorknob, how am I supposed to leave? And she said, well, you're here for 28 days. When she said that, my first thought was, well, I may stay 28 days, but I don't have a problem, and I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to go back to my routine life. It's called denial. So I stayed the 28 days. I went to meetings. I went to NA meetings. For whatever reason, I decided to give it a try anyway, so I managed to get 9 months, and I got some things back. I got my car back. I got a place to stay. I was no longer homeless. My family was letting me come back around, so I decided that I was okay and I didn't need to continue in recovery. And I made a choice to relapse and start using again. That's when it got out of control, so I managed to go back to the program. I quit using, met my now wife of 25 years. We got engaged, got married. I was continuing to drink a little bit, but not a lot. But then I found my way back out there using the hard drugs again. After about 1.5 years, I went on a 3-day binge. I came home, been gone for 3 days. Done went through all my money. Done lost a job because I wasn't showing up for work. I put the key in the door. It was 1 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and the key wouldn't work. And I was like, well, what's going on? So she came to the door and said, you can't live here no more. I can't go through this. She said, you went out to a loaf of bread 3 days ago and you've been gone. You have a problem and you need to get help. So like any other drug addict, I got in the car and said, well, you know, I'll do something. But then I realized I didn't have no money. I didn't have no gas in the car. And this is where my story began to change. I said, God, I need help. I looked in the floorboard and there was a quarter laying in it. And at the time, we didn't have cell phones. And I stopped at the payphone and I called my wife. Gets a little emotional on that. But anyway, I called her and said, if you'll let me come home tonight, I'm going to try to go tomorrow and get some help. So the next morning, her dad came over, and he said, you know, if you don't go get help, you're not going to be able to stay here with her because she's had enough of it. I said, I know. He said, well, I'm going to run my wife, my mother-in-law, to work. When I get back, we're going to find somewhere for you to go. So in the meantime, when he was gone, I was sitting there thinking, you know, this is something I need to do. So I picked the phone book up, turned the page, and I was in the Yellow Pages, and there it was. It's Mount Regis Center, Salem, Virginia. I called the number, and I spoke to the lady on the phone, and I told her what I'd been doing. And she asked me, when could I get there? I said, well, I can be there in a couple of hours. And when I got to that treatment center, when I walked in, I remember saying, you know, I'm in the right place, I need help. And when I set my suitcase down, I smiled, and she said, well, you look like you're pretty happy to be here. I said, I am. I just dropped a whole load of inner feelings, and I'm accepting that I need help. And I am truly grateful for the Mount Regis Treatment Center. While I was there, I was continuously in counseling meetings. When we were there, we were actually allowed to go outside, and we could go on walks with someone with us. And I remember walking, and I actually stopped because I was stunned at the sound that I had heard, that I hadn't heard since I was probably 10 years old. And that was the sound of birds. And I said, wow. And then all of a sudden I realized I could smell springtime, because it was March 20th was my first day at the treatment center. And I was totally blown away by that. And I said, you know, this is awesome. Because I felt like I was going to get the right help I needed, and that I could get away from the lifestyle that I was living, because a lot of addiction is based on the lifestyle you get caught up in. And we suffer, our personalities are really hard on us, because we struggle with that continuously, even in recovery. We feel different, we don't feel accepted, we have all kinds of feelings. But in the recovery, I'm grateful for it, because it's a 12-step program. And it's a simple program. But we as addicts make it complicated at times, because we forget, as long as we work the first step on a daily basis, which is admitting we're powerless over our addiction and that our lives have become unmanageable, we're able to get help, even if it's just coming from within ourselves. But the 12 steps of the program are useless if you're not working them, and you need a sponsor to work them. So in the treatment center, we were taught all of this, and my first day out of the treatment center, I was in there 20 days. My mother and my wife picked me up on a Friday afternoon. When we got to Danville, it was too late to go to a meeting. And I remember being scared. And I couldn't wait till Saturday to get to a meeting, because I did not want to get to a point to where I didn't want to go to a meeting and I didn't think I needed it, because I was so scared that was going to come back. But I made it to the Saturday night meeting. It was at Hope Harbor here in Danville, 8 o'clock. And from where I had went in previously, a couple people were there, and they got up and they hugged me and they welcomed me back, and they didn't ask me any questions. They didn't criticize me. They said, we're here to help, and it's a we program. So I managed to get a sponsor, started working some step work. I got a job in the family business. They suggested first 3 months not to handle a paycheck. So my wife picked my paycheck up on Fridays. That blows me away even to today, because that's how it really got started, you know, of not having those triggers that are hard to get rid of. And so by not having that, I could focus on recovery. I got involved in the fellowship, and when I say that, that means chairing meetings, sponsoring other people. And the next thing I know, I was picking my first year battalion up. And I was still going to 5 and 6 meetings a week. Became area chairperson, which is where we meet once a month. And we donate our money that we raise in our meetings, and we send it to World. And when it goes to World, it goes out to help people that don't know about the program. It spreads the message worldwide. So I managed to stay in a whole lot of service work. But in my first year, I made a decision towards the end of that year to go back to school, because I dropped out of high school. I got my GED here in Danville, Adult Education Center. But I remember during that process, The first time I took the test, I failed it. So you start getting those negative feelings, the old way comes back, the old personality comes in, and I went to a meeting. I shared with them that I took the test that day before and I failed it. And I never received as much support as I received that night when they told me, you're going back, you're going to finish it, and you're going to get it. So the program of recovery is, it has a lot of gifts that we don't see until we stay there. But the message of recovery is hard to get to the people that don't know that there's a program that exists. So that's why anytime I can speak or try to help someone, I do that. So my life really began to change, and I still struggled every day, just like a lot of people. But I managed to leave the family business because there were some things they were uncomfortable with and I was uncomfortable with. You know, I didn't feel really accepted there because I'd done a lot to the business in active addiction. So I made a choice in my second year of recovery to go to work for a company on my own. And I worked for them for 19 years. So when I lost the job because the company closed, even though it was devastating, I had meetings to go to. I had people I could talk to. So I went in meetings and I started sharing what had happened. And one day I was talking to this other addict and she said, you know, maybe you ought to go to college. Because the trade I had was not really demanding in this area. I went over here to DCC and I went in and I told them I wanted to enroll in a program. Wasn't really sure what it would be. There was a recovering addict that was a counselor there. So they put me with him and all of a sudden we knew each other. So he was like, well, look, this is what you need to get into, electrical electronics engineering. And I'm like, well, how long is this? And he said, well, it's about 2.5 years. So I talked to my wife about it. I had to go through a bankruptcy. But I did that and I graduated in 2017 with my degree. I lost some things on the way, but not from using, just by choice of things the way they had to be. What's amazing about that is through all of that process, I never once thought about using. The desire to use drugs left me quite a few years ago. But it was because of the program that I got into and I still stay in with, because I still have the fear that I am one use away. If I ever forget that I'm an addict and start using again, I won't make it back. I've been in the program 24 years now. I've seen a lot of people come in, great people, that suffer from this disease that people really don't know what it's like. They say you have counselors and professionals that are great people that help people, but if you're not living in a disease of addiction, you don't really know what we go through. Because it doesn't matter how long you're in recovery, we still have those different feelings that it's hard to explain to people, because we are different. I learned that I was born with the disease of addiction. It only manifested and come alive and come out of me when I was introduced to a certain drug. And it's drugs off the street. But some people don't get drugs off the street. They get them through prescription. They're prescribed them. And they're very powerful and they're very addictive. And we learn in the program that addiction we're born with it. But unless we get a hold of something that breaks that addiction up and makes it miserable for us to live, we don't really know that we have that. And a lot of people in life will never experience it, and it's great that they don't experience it. But me speaking, a lot of my life was wasted because I didn't know how to live in society without it. Not realizing that using it was keeping me that much further from what was really real. So my message is, that we have in NA is called hope. We give each other hope. We give each other strength. And we work the steps in order, 1 through 12. But we have a 13 step, and it's where we as addicts get with more than one, and we try to help other people that need the help that we got. I almost died from the disease of addiction. I was one of the very few that have been able to get in a program and manage to live life on life's terms, which is what I have to try to do every day. It's not easy, but it's a lot better when you know that there's someone. I have this one special person in my life that's in recovery. We got clean at the same time, and they relapsed after 2 years. And they stayed gone almost 5 years. They made it back, and we have become the best of friends. When we have nobody else we can turn to, we turn to each other. And it just so happens she's a female. And me and her have showed other people in the recovery program that male and female can really have a great friendship in recovery that will last. I just talked to her yesterday on some things that I'm going through. Nothing that's too major, but as an addict, we take everything and we make it a mountain. But when we talk to somebody else about it in recovery, we realize, it really ain't that big. What's really big is there's an addict somewhere right now while we're doing this. That will never, ever know that there was someone else like them that could help them get clean. And they die from this disease. In active addictions, it promises us 3 things. It's misery, you think it wants you dead, but it really don't want you dead. It wants to keep you alive and make you that much more miserable. We have to make a choice, life or death. So every day that I stay clean, I choose to live. But for a lot of addicts, they choose to just stay down that path, and eventually it takes them out of here. If I hadn't have made that first trip up here to the hospital and went through that door that didn't have a doorknob on the inside, because that's where it all started, I don't know that I would have ever knew that this program existed. Like I said, the message is hope and freedom. Freedom from the disease of addiction. You can't get it alone. You have to have someone to help you with it. But I am living proof. And I try to carry the message of the program to the best of my ability. I have a relationship with my son now, who's 34, which means I'm getting really old. But I'm getting old, and I'm getting to see that because I got away from that lifestyle. He actually got to come to live with me. I didn't share that, but he come to live with us in my 2nd year of recovery. He was 11 years old. We went on camping trips. I never thought I would ever have that opportunity again. I never thought that I would manage to have someone in my life, as special as my wife is, that stuck with me and didn't give up on me when I made a choice to get help. She's a big part of my recovery every day. I would like to share the most important part of a program that it suggests when you come in. Find a higher power. It doesn't suggest what higher power. It just means a power greater than you. Because see, when you're in active addiction, you are the power. You're in control. At least you think you are. In recovery, you have to accept that you need a power greater than yourself, because my way is what got me here. The we way and the power greater than me is what keeps me here. And my higher power is God. We have that in a lot of our literature. It's not to fear anyone or to scare anyone into making that your higher power, but I wouldn't take anything for it, because without him I wouldn't be here today. Today I'm not just a name. I am a person. Sometimes I'm accepted, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I accept others and sometimes I don't. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with me today. I don't have to battle me every day. Life is good today. But there are so many of them out there. I see it every day. And it's a gift in a way, because it reminds us as addicts that could be us. You know, we could be that homeless person walking around the corner. I was homeless twice. People didn't know it because I hid it. And it's not a good place to be. Every city should have a place to where somebody can go for reach out for help. Now, there are Narcotic Anonymous meetings everywhere. We are worldwide now. We had a world convention in Atlanta about 10 or 12 years ago. And we were in the Atlanta football dome. And it was full of recovering drug addicts that were clean. And we had a satellite. We were around the world live. We were actually brought to a meeting by satellite in a country to where if they were caught having that meeting, they would lock them up. Another country would even kill them if they caught them having that meeting. But they were having them, and they were in recovery. And they weren't in it, you know, they wasn't fighting the disease of addiction. They were clean. And it was worth it. So that's how big this program is. But even as big as it is, there are so many people that don't know it exists. But there are meetings in Danville, Virginia, 7 days a week, 2 and 3 times a day. There's no excuse why anyone that wants recovery and wants to get clean can't go to a meeting and get clean.